Florida homeowners could be looking at one of the largest property tax amendments in the state's history. Now, before you go celebrating and say my property taxes are going away, there's a couple of things you need to know. And that's what I'm going to go over in this video. What you need to know, what may happen, what could happen, and some of my thoughts around where I think this might do towards the last 2 months of this year. It could be an absolute property boom here in Florida. Well, we'll get into that a little bit later. All right, for those of you who don't know, my name is Alex Haigh. I've been selling real estate here on the Treasure Coast for over 20 years. Now, myself and my team, you could go check out our Google business profile, over 550 reviews there. Now, we cover the Treasure Coast area going all the way from Vero Beach down into West Palm Beach. And we cover luxury property, golf course communities, vacant land. We help people find second homes. That's what we do. But what I do here is try to keep you up to speed on what's going on with the Florida real estate market. I do data videos, I do local attractions, kind of hidden spots, and really what this area is like for you to feel it. Now let's get into the video on what you need to know. All right, so what is actually being proposed? Now, here's essentially the simple version. Florida lawmakers have proposed a constitutional amendment. Now, this amendment is called Save Our Homes from Excessive Property Taxes. Doesn't that sound good? From excessive property taxes. Please save us, government, from the taxes that you charge us to own our own homes. Now, a lot of these taxes go towards things that are important, and there's a couple things in this bill that you really need to understand because there's a lot of FOMO or fear that's being generated out there on what this could do to local municipalities, and I'm going to try to clear up some of that. Now, the current structure gives the Florida homeowners up to a $50,000 homestead exemption, with part of that being applied to your property taxes, and part of it is going to non-school taxes. So there's those two portions. Now, this is, if nothing, you take nothing else out of this video, that non-school property tax. Now, the part of this that's be going away is the non-school property tax. That's a really important thing to understand. So money for schools are not going away, and also money for first responders, firefighters, and that in the major municipalities, that those budgets are very, very flush. So they're not going to really have any problem there. And as a little bit of a side note, an overarching theme in this is, remember, property values have increased by sometimes threefold over the last about 7 years. And as a result, taxes have gone up because those property values go up and the assessments go up. So you're paying 3 times more taxes than you were 7, 8 years ago, and really have the budgets. Well, sure, government wants to spend what government gets, and if they see an opportunity to get that, they're going to go for more. But what this is really doing, Governor DeSantis and the legislature are basically saying, hey, you know, property values have gone up by 3 times, but living expenses haven't gone up by 3 times, and also the municipal services that these governments provide haven't really gone up. They shouldn't have gone up by 3%. Maybe some governments actually increase their budgets, of course. But what this is going to do is kind of stall that from just continuing to have property values rise and also assessments rise and taxes rise, and it's a doom loop. And that's what they're trying to stop. Now, currently, the current structure gives Florida homeowners a $50,000 homestead exemption. Now, this would increase to $150,000 by 2027 and $250,000 by 2028. Now, with inflation adjustments put in there for 2029. The key phrase here, again, is non-school property taxes. So when people say they could eliminate property taxes for some homeowners, what they really mean is that some homeowners could see a major reduction or possibly even an elimination of the non-school portion of the tax bill. School taxes would still remain. I emphasize that. School taxes will still remain. Now, the first thing, again, that you need to know if you didn't catch it was, this is the most important point of the whole video. As of right now, your Florida property taxes have not changed because of this proposal. And the constitutional amendment in Florida requires 60%, again, 60% of the approval for this to happen. This is not something that automatically happens just because it put onto the ballot. The voters are going to have the final say on this. Now, the biggest potential winners are the Florida homeowners who already have Homestead Florida exemption in their primary residence. That means it is aimed at people who live in the home and are permanent residents. It's not designed to provide for second homes, vacation homes, investment properties, rental properties, or commercial properties. And if you own a homestead property, this could reduce the taxable amount or the value for the non-school portion. Now, depending on your assessed value, your county, your municipality, and your local millage rates, the savings really could be significant. Every property is different. Now, a homeowner in Stewart, in Palm City, up in Vero, down in West Palm Beach could be a little different from Orlando. You're gonna have to check and see what your assessed value is. You can always go on to the tax assessor site, see what your assessed value is, or look at that bill that you never really look at and see what your assessed value is, and look at the portion that is the non-school portion, and that's the portion that you want to be looking at that could go away if everything passes with 60% of the majority vote on November 3rd. What about people that are thinking about moving to Florida? This is a huge deal for relocation buyers. Now, the proposal includes a phase-in period for new Florida residents. People who move to Florida after December of 2026 would receive a smaller initial deduction than people that live here now, and or you're gonna have to wait 5 years. So you're gonna get a small, you will feel it a little bit. So yeah, you would, if you're thinking about moving to Florida and you're on the fence and you're like, I'm gonna roll the dice here because if this thing passes, I'm gonna save a lot of money on my property taxes. You have to close by December 31st here in 2026. If you don't, then there is a portion in there that will have a small reduction, and then you're gonna have to wait ultimately 5 years to get that full deduction. But still, 5 years goes by fast, and property taxes can add up to a lot. I did an analysis for a customer the other day, was looking at a $5 million property, and he was kind of on the fence about whether he was gonna do it or not. We talked about a lot of different things. We calculated though, over a 5-year period, if he stayed in New Jersey where he is now, he would save close to $400,000 over that 5 years. And now that's a running horse. That's a little bit of a bubblegum guerrilla math, but it's there because the property that he's looking at was around $40,000 a year for property taxes. So it wasn't a major leap to say you could potentially save about $400,000. Now, what does this mean ultimately for buyers and sellers? Now, for buyers, one of the things, no matter what, you do not want to look at the current property assessed, well, you want to look at the current property assessed value, but you don't want to look at what they are paying, because ultimately, back to the homestead, the whole thing here, which is one of the provisions that help to kind of protect people, especially senior citizens that move to Florida and are on a fixed budget. You don't want their taxes going up astronomically. So if you're looking at buying a home, don't look at the taxes that are on the MLS sheet or even in public records and say, oh, that's what my taxes are gonna be. Because that person could have been living there 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they have a low assessed value because they could only be increased by 3% a year. So that's a big thing to think about, just in general. If you're watching this video, and even if you're not looking at this homestead thing, you're thinking about moving to Florida, don't look at that, what the current or last year's taxes were that homeowner paid. Right? Because it's not always going to be accurate. Now, in Florida, property taxes reset when the new homeowner moves in. The current owner may have owned the property for years. This is what I'm trying to say. And they may have in there the Save Our Florida Home protection and may have a much lower assessed value. This is what I'm speaking to. So buyers need to estimate their future tax bill based on the assessed value and run it from there. So I just, as a little key thing in here, in this aside, even if this doesn't pass, hopefully this is of value to you, that you don't just look at what the past tax year was and then say, okay, that's what I'm gonna pay in taxes. It's just not gonna be always the case. Now, for sellers out there, this could be a potential marketing advantage to you. Let's put it that way. Now, you can't go on and put it into MLS and say, oh, property taxes could go down. You can't do that. But there's enough people out there that see what's going on there, and you kind of have a general, just the media in general is a marketing element for you, because they're talking about this, substantial potential reduction in homestead. So for you sellers out there, if you're thinking about selling, actually working with a seller right now that was thinking about putting their property on the market next year, and I was like, well, if you could speed that up a little bit and check out November and December and have it on the market just in case this passes, you could see that, boom, this is, a multi-million-dollar seller. So ultimately, that could be a really big advantage for customers considering buying that home. So it's not so much that you can advertise this from a marketing standpoint yourself. The media really is doing it for you. That's kind of what I'm trying to say here. All right, let's talk about what the potential downside is here for this. Now, this is where the conversation kind of gets a little bit complicated, so try to work with me here. Now, supporters say this could provide a real relief for Florida homeowners who have been hit by these really high property values, which I mentioned, the property values have gone up significantly, especially since the big C word there. And insurance costs have gone up, inflation has gone up, and affordability creates a pressure on all of that. Now, the critics kind of argue that if local governments collect less in property taxes, they may have to cut services, raise fees, or shift the public burden kind of somewhere else. Now, property taxes help fund local services like parks, emergency services, and other local government functions. So the question is not just, will homeowners save money? The bigger question is, what happens next if local governments receive less revenue? That's, I think, one of the big concerns. And that could show up in different ways depending on the county or the city. Now, what I've read into this is the ones that could be hit the hardest with potential non-subsidizing from the state are the small local municipalities. So if you're out in a really small local municipality, this could hurt. Now, overall, you're going to have to ask yourself, that extra money that you're saving, is it worth the potential reduction in services? All right, so now you buyers out there, what should you do right now? Now, if you're buying a property in Florida, especially here on the Treasure Coast, here's what you need to do. You need to assume that the current taxes are your taxes. Now, as far as realistic tax estimator, you can go onto the tax estimator site. You can put in what the amount is that you pay into your local municipality into that tax assessor site, and it will give you a rough estimate of what your taxes are going to be. Now, you need to understand also whether this is your primary home or your second home. That should be pretty elementary. And then also ask whether you qualify for that homestead exemption. Now, remember, you have to live in Florida basically for over 190 days. Now, that can be a combination. There's our bright line in the back going over the Dixie Bridge. I want you to see that. There goes the bright line. We'll be taking that out of Stewart down to Miami soon. But now, if you're moving from out of state, what you really want to pay attention to is that proposed new resident phase-in rule. The phase-in rule, that's what you want to dive into. So let's say you close after December 30th. Let's say it passes, and then you close after December 31st. You want to look at what that proposed new resident phase-in is. How much are you going to save year after year after year? Now, this is especially important for you people moving from the Northeast, the Midwest, especially those blue states. Really take a look at what that phase-in will be, and you can maybe compare that to how much property tax or income tax, if you're in one of those blue states that's super egregious on income tax as well. You want to take a look and say, weigh it up. What's it going to cost to move here? What's your lifestyle? This is something we can talk to you about, your lifestyle, how far you want to be from the airport, what kind of amenities you want in a community, and compare all of that and really make an educated decision based on the numbers, because there are some numbers you can look at here in some acute numbers, not just kind of monkey math, and determine if this is going to be a good move for you. Now, let's talk about sellers. If you're thinking about selling, this is another reason you really want to understand your numbers. And if the amendment passes, buyers may become more focused on that homestead eligibility, tax savings, and other monthly costs. That could really affect how you position the property. That's why you want a good agent out there positioning this thing properly for you. Now, the best thing you can do is avoid making claims that are not final yet. Don't put that on any of the MLS remarks. Use language like, don't use language like potential property tax cuts, Florida voters will decide on property. Don't put any of that stuff into the MLS, as it can be a little misleading. It keeps the conversation professional and accurate. You do not want to be mercurial or misleading in any of your advertising to sell your property. All right, so wrapping us all up, the bottom line, this proposal could significantly reduce your property taxes. It does not eliminate those school taxes. And again, it does have to be approved by 60% of the majority vote. And also, even if it passes, the impact will vary kind of depending on the property, your assessed value, where you live, and whether you kind of already have a property home exemption. So don't just read the headline, understand the details. Now, if you found this helpful, all I'd ask is that you hit the like below. Please let me know and let the algorithm know that you like this kind of content. And I'd also love to hear from you below. What do you think about this? What are your concerns? What are your aspirations? What do you think? Do you think there could be a big boom? Drop me a comment below. I'd really love to hear from you. And as always, reach out anytime. We'd love to have a conversation with you about real estate and what your wants and needs are here in the Southeast Florida area. We'll see you on the next video.